Pregnant mistress moves in, cheating husband kicks out wife, but a billionaire saves her. They say every perfect marriage hides its cracks, but for Emily Watson, those cracks turned into craters overnight. One moment, she was the cherished wife of a self-made millionaire, Harrison Watson, living in a luxurious estate beyond her wildest dreams. The next, she found her world shattering before her eyes, a devastating betrayal, a pregnant mistress demanding her place, and an ultimatum that drove Emily out of her own home. Confused, heartbroken, and left with nowhere to go, Emily prepared to face a cruel reality. Yet amid the darkness, a mysterious millionaire, Alexander Greenwood, emerged, a beacon of hope she never saw coming. Emily Watson had always prided herself on being practical. Even when she married Harrison Watson, a man with soaring ambitions and charm that rivaled any Hollywood heartthrob, her feet remained planted firmly on the ground. She recalled the early days of their relationship, dinners in quaint cafes, late-night walks by the pier discussing their future, the ring he presented on a crisp autumn evening. She was an ordinary girl from Maplewood, a small town near Seattle, and he was an aspiring real estate investor determined to carve out an empire. Their union felt like a romantic fairy tale, one that promised a lifetime of excitement. Yet, deep down, Emily suspected that if something appeared too good to be true, it probably was. Over the past year, Harrison had grown distant. Busy might have been an acceptable excuse. He managed multiple properties and chaired business conferences across the country. But it was more than that. A subtle coldness replaced his once warm eyes whenever Emily tried to discuss everyday matters. Business dinners grew later and more frequent. Weekend getaways were postponed indefinitely. And the phone calls during his supposedly busy nights, she couldn't help noticing how hushed his tone became whenever she walked into the room. Still, Emily fought to keep doubt at bay. Marriage was sacred to her, and she had stood before friends and family, promising to remain loyal, trusting, and forgiving for better or for worse. Love, she had always believed, was an anchor even when storms raged overhead. If Harrison was going through something, a business crisis or personal stress, she wanted to be there for him. After all, that was her role as a wife. Yet Harrison never confided in her anymore, and she felt more like a silent spectator on the sidelines of her own relationship. It was on a warm April evening that the first bombshell dropped. Emily found a text on Harrison's phone, an overly affectionate message from someone named Serena Delgado. Torn by a mix of curiosity, dread, and guilt, she looked further. The conversation was intimate, peppered with stolen photos and confessions of longing that Emily had never heard from Harrison, at least not in a very long time. Stunned, she confronted him. He insisted it was nothing but a flirtatious mistake, the kind of drunken text exchange that meant absolutely nothing. Emily wanted to believe him. She truly did, because the alternative, that her husband was indeed cheating, was too painful to bear. She felt uncertain about whether she was just reading too much into an isolated event. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, but her heart clenched painfully at the memory of that message. Serena Delgado. The name echoed in her mind. The fact was, something had changed. Harrison continued traveling even more, often to Los Angeles or New York, leaving Emily behind in their enormous Seattle home. Days became weeks without so much as a genuine conversation. He assured her it was only temporary. His real estate empire was expanding, but the question kept gnawing at Emily. Expanding into what? She might have been naive, but she wasn't foolish. She recognized that a wedge was driving them apart, one that looked suspiciously like a woman. One evening, Emily confided in her closest friend, Miranda Stewart, a dear companion since college. Miranda listened intently as Emily poured her heart out. Miranda's dark brown eyes softened with sympathy. She didn't sugarcoat the possibility that Harrison was unfaithful, but she also knew the heartbreak that came from jumping to conclusions. "You need to confront him, Em," she said. "You can't live in this limbo. Either he's going to work on the marriage with you, or he's not. But you deserve the truth." Emily knew her friend was right. At the same time, fear wrestled with her better judgment. Was she ready to hear the truth if it was the worst possible news? Could she endure her marriage disintegrating if he truly was involved with another woman? Throughout that restless night, Emily lay awake in their king-sized bed, staring at the empty space beside her, where Harrison slept on the rare occasions he was home. Her heart thumped with dread at the idea of a confrontation. What if Harrison admitted he was cheating? What if he turned the tables on her, blaming her for snooping or for not being supportive enough? The unknown seemed more terrifying than any known heartbreak. After years of believing in the promise of forever, she felt the ground shifting beneath her. She was a wife committed to love, loyalty, and the life they had built together. But no matter how hard she tried, she could not shake the creeping suspicion that everything she held dear was about to collapse. The confrontation Emily had rehearsed in her mind countless times finally happened during a rare weekend when Harrison was home. She approached him in the living room, a sprawling space adorned with modern art, plush leather couches, and a panoramic view of Lake Washington. Harrison was sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone. His suit jacket hung on the arm of the couch, tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled. He looked every bit the busy, important man with no time for distractions. "Can we talk?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from trembling. Harrison glanced up, mild annoyance flickering across his face. "Sure, but make it quick, Em. I've got to head out to a meeting soon." Emily's nerves were on edge. "I want to know what's going on with you, with us," he shrugged. "I've told you 1,000,000 times, it's work. My schedule has been insane." "Harrison," she pressed, "I saw the text you received from Serena Delgado. You promised it was just a mistake, but your behavior hasn't changed. You're never home. You're distant. I need to know if you're seeing her." Silence hung between them, growing heavier by the second. Emily watched him carefully, noticing the way his jaw clenched and his eyes darted away. Finally, he sighed dramatically, as though her questions were an inconvenience rather than a legitimate concern. "Emily, I told you, that text meant nothing. I keep telling you the same thing. If you can't trust me, that's your problem, not mine." She could hardly believe his tone. It stung, though something else tugged at her recognition that he hadn't explicitly denied anything. Instead, he deflected. Her heart hammered in her chest. "If it was nothing, why are you always so secretive? Harrison, if you've fallen out of love with me, just tell me." He looked away for a long moment, running a hand through his hair. Then he stood up abruptly, phone clutched in one hand. "I don't have time for this right now. I've got an important negotiation downtown. We'll talk later." He was out the door before she could utter another word. Emily stood there, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, feeling foolish for thinking she could corner him into confessing. Doubt, denial, and heartbreak warred within her. She wanted to hold on to the hope that her marriage was salvageable, but all signs pointed to a growing darkness beneath Harrison's polished exterior. Her thoughts kept straying to Serena Delgado. Who was she? Why was Harrison so protective of her identity? Emily decided to do something she never imagined she would. She hired a private investigator. It felt drastic, but her gut screamed that she needed answers. If there was more to this story, she had to know. She contacted a discreet agency recommended by her friend Miranda. The investigator, a man named Oliver Chambers, was older, calm, and discreet. Over a quick phone call, he explained, he would quietly follow Harrison, document any suspicious behavior, and report back. Within days, Oliver provided a preliminary update that shattered whatever illusions Emily clung to. Harrison wasn't just meeting clients in his late-night dinners. He had been spotted with Serena Delgado, tall, strikingly beautiful, with cascading dark hair, entering exclusive restaurants, hotels, and even a private penthouse in downtown Seattle. The pictures were fuzzy but incriminating enough. A swirl of disbelief and betrayal washed over Emily. Yet, as devastating as it was, part of her felt oddly relieved to finally have proof. At least she wasn't imagining things. Harrison was living a double life, the guilt of distrust lifted, replaced by heartbreak and something more potent, anger. She had tried to be the loyal wife. She had given him her trust, her devotion, and years of unwavering support. Now she realized how cheaply he had thrown it all away. Emily confronted him one evening. As soon as he walked in, she waited in the foyer, a folder of Oliver's photographs clutched in her hand. Before Harrison could set down his briefcase, she thrust the damning evidence at him. He flipped through the photos, and for a moment his face went pale, but Harrison's shock quickly turned to anger. "You had me followed," he barked. "This is how little you trust me. You haven't given me a single reason to trust you." Emily shot back, her voice trembling. "You lied to me, Harrison. Look at these photos. I know everything." He closed the folder and tossed it onto a nearby table. His silence was damning. He didn't bother offering any elaborate excuse or apology. Instead, he shrugged, as though cornered. "Fine," he muttered. "I won't insult you with denials anymore. I am seeing Serena. Are you happy now?" Emily's heart felt like it had been impaled. Tears threatened to spill, but she refused to break down in front of him. How could you do this to me, Harrison? To us?" He ran a hand over his face, as though her question was a bothersome riddle. "Things change, Em. People change. Do you think I'm the same man you married? The same man from Maplewood? We live in a different world now. I have bigger responsibilities, bigger goals." Her voice cracked. "We took vows." "You promised. Promises made in a different context," he interrupted, eyes cold. "Look, I'm not some starry-eyed dreamer anymore. I've built a reputation, wealth, and a life that requires certain sacrifices. You can't expect me to remain the same small-town guy." His words stung, an undeniable blow to the idealistic foundation of their marriage. She searched his face, hoping for a sign of remorse, but found nothing. Instead, a steely determination glinted in his eyes. It was in that moment she understood the man she had loved no longer existed. In his place stood a stranger, ruthless, unrepentant, and dismissive of the life they had once built together. Emily's tears finally spilled over. She retreated up the grand staircase, feeling more alone than ever in her own home. She locked herself in the guest bedroom. She couldn't bear to stay in the master suite that now felt haunted by betrayal. She realized that the simplest illusions she'd believed in had collapsed. Their marriage might have only been a stepping stone for Harrison's ambition, an accessory to his shining image. Where her love had been real, his had evidently faded, replaced by a thirst for something else: adventure, danger, or the thrill of a new conquest. She remembered Miranda's words, "You deserve the truth." Well, she had it now, and the truth was a blade that cut deeply. In the days following the brutal confession, Emily tried to envision her next move. Part of her wanted to scream at Harrison, demand a divorce, and walk away from the opulence that felt tainted by his lies. Another part, perhaps more vulnerable, still harbored the faint hope that he would come to his senses, realize he was destroying everything for a fleeting affair, and beg for forgiveness. But Harrison remained indifferent, rarely even coming home. When he did, they barely acknowledged each other. Then, on a muggy June evening, Harrison returned to the house accompanied by Serena Delgado. Emily had been sitting in the living room, numb to the flickering television, when they strolled in. Serena was indeed stunning, wearing a fitted designer dress that accentuated her figure, her hand resting protectively over her midsection. Emily's heart sank at the sight. Serena's belly had a slight but unmistakable bump. "This is my house, too," Serena said matter-of-factly, as though she were discussing the weather, "and I have nowhere else to go." Emily looked to Harrison, hoping this was some twisted joke. Instead, Harrison stepped forward, unashamed. "Serena's pregnant," he announced, his expression unnervingly calm. "It's my child. I promised her I would take care of her, so she's moving in." For a moment, Emily felt the world tilt under her feet. "You're throwing this at me out of nowhere?" she whispered, voice shaking. Harrison exhaled. "It's not out of nowhere. Our marriage hasn't been working, and now Serena is expecting my child. I need to be by her side." Emily stared at him, a heart-wrenching realization surging through her. Her marriage was over. Any pretense of healing or reconciliation had vaporized. "What about me? I'm still your wife." "What do you expect me to do now?" Serena lowered herself onto the couch, a smug smile tugging at her lips. "I suggest you find somewhere else to stay, Emily. This environment is stressful for the baby, and I'd rather not deal with the tension. The nerve of this woman carrying the child of a married man and now ordering his wife to leave her own home." Emily's anger flared. "How dare you walk into this house and talk to me like that?" Harrison intervened, raising a hand as though pacifying two squabbling children. "Stop it. Look, Emily, I'll be honest. I think it's best you find somewhere else to live. I'll take care of the finances. We can come to some agreement, but Serena and I need our space." The words landed like a sledgehammer. Despite the extravagance of the mansion, it was her home, the place she had lovingly decorated, the setting of countless memories, big and small. Now, Harrison wanted to uproot her, simply because he had impregnated his mistress. The betrayal was so stark, so brazen, that Emily could only stare at him in shock. "You can't be serious," she croaked, tears welling up again, though she tried to blink them away. "I've never been more serious," Harrison replied coldly. "You and I both know we're done, Em. Let's not pretend anymore. I'll send some staff to help you pack. You'll be taken care of financially, but I think you should leave tonight." The finality of his tone confirmed it. There was no going back. Emily felt a flash of humiliation, heartbreak, and rage. She wanted to scream at him, to ask what she had done to deserve this cruelty. But all that came out was a broken whisper, "You're a monster, Harrison." She bolted upstairs, tears streaming, half running, half stumbling as she packed a suitcase in a daze. She fumbled with clothes, personal items, memories collected over years of marriage. She had no plan. Where would she even go at this hour? Could she show up at Miranda's doorstep? A swirl of panic and devastation crashed over her. Downstairs, she heard Serena's soft laughter and Harrison's low voice as they talked, presumably discussing trivial matters about how to rearrange the furniture to suit Serena's taste. This was beyond heartbreak. It was a nightmare from which she yearned to wake up. Clutching her suitcase, she fled downstairs. She could not bring herself to look at them. All she saw in the corner of her eye was Serena's satisfied smirk, a confirmation that Emily was being usurped in every sense of the word. Without a backward glance, Emily stepped out into the night, a swirl of cool air and despair enveloping her. The mansion door slammed shut behind her, cutting her off from the life she once knew. The sight of her car in the driveway was a brutal reminder that, to the outside world, she was still Mrs. Watson, the wealthy wife who had it all. But the reality was far darker. Her life had been ripped away in the blink of an eye, all because her husband's mistress was carrying his child. As Emily climbed into her car and started the engine, she thought of the betrayal, the humiliation, the uncertainty that lay ahead. For the first time in her life, she felt utterly powerless, like a stranger in her own existence. Emily drove aimlessly through the city, tears blurring her vision as she replayed the night's events in her head. Part of her wanted to call Miranda, but it was already late, and she felt ashamed of her predicament. Another part thought about checking into a hotel, but even that felt too daunting. In desperation, she called her brother, Jeremy Caldwell, who lived 2 hours away in Portland. Sleepy and alarmed, Jeremy answered after several rings. She poured out a flood of words, confessing everything that had just happened. His voice, usually confident, turned shaky with disbelief. "That son of a M, you should come down here. I'll get the guest room ready. Stay as long as you need." Though Jeremy's offer was comforting, Emily hesitated. She didn't want to be a burden. She also felt, in a strange twist, that running to her brother might make it all too real. Maybe she wanted some space to digest it all alone, to figure out her next step. With trembling hands, she thanked him and said she'd consider it, but that she had to sort her thoughts first. She told him she'd call back soon. By the time she hung up, she found herself parked in front of an upscale lounge near downtown the Evergreen Vista, a modern building with sleek black windows and gold lettering. A wave of nostalgia washed over her. Before the marriage began to crumble, she and Harrison had attended an event there, hosted by an old friend of his, a man named Alexander Greenwood, also a successful entrepreneur who ran a chain of luxury hotels and clubs. Alexander had always exuded a subtle air of kindness behind his polished demeanor. He and Harrison weren't particularly close. They moved in the same social circles, but parted ways on multiple business ventures due to conflicting interests. Yet Emily remembered how Alexander would greet her warmly at social gatherings, always with genuine curiosity about her life. She recalled once, at a charity gala, how he had confided in her about his philanthropic dreams, building shelters in underprivileged neighborhoods. She found him far more compassionate than most millionaires she'd met in Harrison's orbit. She sat there in the driver's seat, tears dried but cheeks still stained, remembering that same charity gala. Alexander had politely listened to her talk about her interest in setting up community centers in her old hometown. He had even given her his personal card, telling her to contact him if she ever needed help with a charity event. Now, ironically, she needed help, but of a vastly different sort. Almost on autopilot, she retrieved her purse and found that card. Alexander Greenwood, CEO of Greenwood Luxury Holdings. There was a personal phone number scribbled beneath his name. Her mind swirled. Would it be too outrageous to call him now, especially about something so personal and humiliating? Yet at that moment, she realized she had no idea where else to go. The idea of sleeping in her car or drifting into a random hotel alone sounded terrifying. She dialed the number, heart pounding. The phone rang 3 times before a groggy but recognizable voice answered. "Hello?" Alexander sounded concerned, as though anticipating bad news at such a late hour. "This is Emily Watson, from the charity events." Her voice trembled with uncertainty. There was a brief silence, and then he spoke gently. "Emily? It's quite late. Are you all right?" And in that moment, the floodgates opened. She whispered the entire story, her voice shaking with fresh sobs. How Harrison had cheated, how the mistress was pregnant, how they demanded she leave her own home. She hardly knew Alexander beyond polite society chatter, but she clung to the faint memory of his kindness. When she finished talking, she realized how ridiculous she must sound calling an acquaintance in the dead of night, unloading her heartbreak. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, embarrassment blooming. "I shouldn't have. I don't know who else to call. I'm parked outside the Evergreen Vista, actually." "Please don't worry, I'll figure something." Her rambling ceased when he interrupted, his voice calm yet urgent. "Where exactly are you? Are you alone? You shouldn't be on the street in the middle of the night." She told him the address, tears forming again, because even hearing concern from someone felt overwhelming. "I'm fine," she tried to insist, though her voice betrayed her. "You're not," Alexander said firmly. "Stay right there. I'm sending one of my people to escort you into the Evergreen Vista. I own that building. You'll have a room for the night, free of charge. I'll be there as soon as I can." Before she could protest, he ended the call. Emily sat there, stunned, feeling a swirl of relief and confusion. Why was Alexander being so generous? They'd barely had more than a few conversations, but she had no time to second-guess his kindness. Within minutes, a well-dressed employee approached her car, gently tapped on her window, and guided her inside. The foyer of the Evergreen Vista was grand, with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The staff member quietly guided her to an elevator that whisked them to the 10th floor. Moments later, she found herself in a luxurious suite boasting floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the Seattle skyline, plush furniture, and a king-sized bed that promised comfort she desperately needed. The employee, introducing himself as Vincent, set her suitcase down with respectful deference. He mentioned that Mr. Greenwood was on his way and that if she needed anything, she should just dial the front desk. Left alone, Emily sank onto the sofa, hugging a pillow. Her world had imploded in the most humiliating public way possible, yet here she was safe for the moment, thanks to the help of a man she barely knew. Her emotions tumbled in confusion, heartbreak, and a curious gratitude. Some 30 minutes later, the room's doorbell chimed. Emily walked over cautiously and opened it to see Alexander Greenwood. He was dressed casually in a black sweater and jeans, his sandy hair slightly tousled as though he had rushed out of bed. Concern etched his refined features. Without a word, he gently ushered her back into the suite, gesturing for her to sit on the sofa. "Emily, I'm so sorry for what you're going through," he said softly. His empathy was almost too much to bear. New tears welled up in her eyes, and she tried to stifle them. "Thank you for letting me stay here. I didn't know who else to call." Alexander sank into an armchair opposite her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You can stay as long as you need," he insisted. "No charge. If you prefer something more private, I have a property outside the city, a vacation home. That's not in use right now. It's in a gated community, very secure. If you need a place to gather your thoughts or just escape, it's yours." Emily stared at him, stunned. The kindness of this near stranger contrasted so sharply with the cruelty she had just experienced from her own husband. Overwhelmed, she could only manage a choked thank you. Alexander gave a small nod and rose to leave. "I'll let you rest, but I'll check on you tomorrow. If you need anything, Vincent is on call tonight. And Emily, please know you're not alone. Sometimes life blindsides us, but you'll stand on your own 2 feet again. Until then, let me help." As he left, a warmth spread through Emily's chest, a flicker of hope in the midst of overwhelming despair. She curled up on the sofa, staring at the bright city lights outside, and for the first time since she had fled the mansion, she felt safe. Morning arrived with the Seattle sun peeking through the skyscrapers. Emily woke up in the plush bed, briefly disoriented by her surroundings until the events of the previous night came rushing back. She dressed slowly, rummaging through the suitcase she had packed in a frantic rush. Then she stepped out into the hallway, heading downstairs to the elegant lounge for coffee. To her surprise, Alexander was already there, sitting at a small table near the window with a cup of coffee and a pastry in front of him. When he saw her, he stood, greeting her with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Emily. How are you holding up?" She gave a weary shrug, cheeks flushing. "I'm coping, I guess. Thank you for everything you did last night." He gestured to the seat across from him and she sat down. "I'm sorry to be the one to bring this up," he began carefully, "but have you spoken to Harrison or anyone else since you left?" Emily shook her head, the memory still raw. "No, I don't think I can face him yet. He and his mistress basically told me to leave. I guess he'll send me the divorce papers eventually." "I'm not sure." Alexander leaned back in his chair, a contemplative look crossing his face. You deserve time to figure out what you want. You don't have to rush. But when you're ready, you may need legal counsel. If you'd like, I can recommend a reputable attorney, someone discreet, who won't turn this into a tabloid spectacle. She nodded, her heart heavy but grateful for the guidance. I would appreciate that. A quiet pause settled. Then Alexander spoke again, voice gentle. I know we aren't close friends, Emily, but I want to help however I can. If you'd rather not stay in the city right now, I can have you taken to the lake house I mentioned. It's a peaceful place, outside the glare of the public eye. Emily thought of the large, hollow mansion she had just left, haunted by betrayal, and shuddered. Perhaps a tranquil retreat would do her good. That sounds wonderful. I could use a little peace right now. Alexander pulled out his phone. I'll make the arrangements. It's completely up to you how long you stay. Later that afternoon, Emily found herself traveling to Greenwood Lake House, an hour's drive from Seattle. The scenery was breathtaking. Tall pines lined the winding driveway, opening up to a secluded estate with a charming, modern cabin perched on a hillside, overlooking a shimmering lake. A caretaker, Martha Chambers, welcomed Emily warmly, handing her the keys and showing her around. Martha mentioned that Mr. Greenwood visited occasionally, but the place was mostly vacant. Inside, the cabin was spacious yet cozy, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that let in abundant natural light, a stone fireplace, and understated decor. It exuded a peaceful energy far removed from the noise of the city and the chaos of Emily's personal life. On her first night there, Emily found herself sitting on the wooden deck, gazing at the calm lake waters under a blanket of stars. The trauma of Harrison's betrayal lingered in her chest, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a gentle sense of possibility. She had left behind years of marriage, yes, but that meant, in some way, she was starting anew. The thought both scared and comforted her. Over the next few days, Emily tried to keep her mind occupied. She did yoga by the lakeside, read books she had never finished, cooked simple meals in the cabin's well-stocked kitchen. Now and then, she'd text Miranda, who was furious and demanded to visit. Emily postponed that visit, saying she needed to rest and reflect. Alexander called every couple of days to check on her well-being, always polite, never intrusive. True to his word, he also referred her to a top-tier lawyer named Victoria Hensley. On one phone call, Victoria explained the basics of the divorce process, potential settlement options, and the need to document everything, especially because there was a mistress carrying Harrison's child. Though daunting, hearing a professional voice guiding her felt empowering. She realized she was not as powerless as she had believed. One evening, after a particularly rough day filled with mental battles, replaying images of Harrison and Serena in her house, Emily found herself at the lake's edge, skipping stones across the water. A sleek SUV pulled into the driveway. She turned to see Alexander stepping out, dressed in casual chinos and a light sweater. Surprised, she stood up, brushing off her jeans. I hope I'm not intruding, he said with a gentle smile. I was in the area for a site inspection at another property and thought I'd drop by to see how you're doing. He looked around, the warmth in his eyes reflecting genuine concern. Is this place comfortable enough for you? Emily nodded, touched by his consideration. It's perfect, peaceful and beautiful. They ended up sharing a simple meal Martha prepared. Over dinner, Emily opened up about her emotional whirlpool, the anger, the heartbreak, and the occasional guilt for not seeing Harrison's betrayal sooner. Alexander listened intently, rarely interjecting, just letting her talk. She found it unexpectedly cathartic. After finishing the meal, they walked out onto the deck again, the night sky overhead. I might not know exactly what you're going through, Alexander said softly, but I do understand heartbreak. I once lost someone I loved dearly. He paused, looking down as though the memory still pained him. It was different. She passed away due to illness. But I remember feeling that numbness, that sense of your life unraveling. Emily's eyes widened. She had heard rumors of a tragedy in Alexander's past, but never the details. Compassion flooded her. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." He offered a faint smile. "It's been years, but some pains never fully leave. They just become part of you. You learn to live again, though it feels impossible at first." His admission touched her deeply. It was a reminder that everyone carried hidden scars. The wealthy, the successful, they weren't immune to life's cruelties. In that moment, she realized how safe she felt around Alexander, how his presence exuded a calm that steadied her unraveling nerves. "I'm trying to find my footing," she murmured, hugging her arms around herself. "I spent so long supporting Harrison's dreams. I barely remember my own." Alexander turned to face her. "What did you love before meeting him?" She blinked, recalling her younger self, her passion for community work, her fascination with interior design, her dream of opening a youth center in Maplewood. "I wanted to do social outreach, especially for teens and single mothers. I came from a modest background, and I've seen how one chance can change someone's life." He listened, his expression thoughtful. "Then maybe this is your chance to revisit that dream. You have talents, Emily. Don't let them go to waste." She felt a stir in her chest, a spark of something akin to hope. In the wake of heartbreak, hearing someone validate her aspirations was like a breath of fresh air. Maybe the future wasn't just a looming void. Maybe, with support and newfound courage, she could rediscover herself. They spoke until the sky was ink black, sharing stories, discussing possibilities. And for the first time since Harrison's betrayal, Emily went to bed feeling a cautious optimism blooming within her. Back in Seattle, the tabloids had started buzzing about Harrison Watson, the flashy real estate tycoon, rumored to have impregnated his mistress. Emily tried to ignore it, but she couldn't evade the world forever. Her phone lit up with messages from acquaintances and even some press inquiries. She kept her circle limited. Only Miranda and Jeremy were updated about her whereabouts. They offered unwavering support, though both worried about her isolation. Meanwhile, as Victoria Hensley delved into the details of Harrison's assets, she discovered that Harrison had moved certain finances around in an apparent attempt to shield them from potential divorce settlements. There were shell companies, hidden real estate investments, and suspicious overseas accounts. Victoria urged Emily to keep a low profile, but to remain firm. Emily had never wanted a vicious legal battle. She wanted what was fair, but mostly she just wanted closure and a new beginning. Yet it seemed Harrison would not make it simple. One afternoon her phone buzzed. It was Harrison. Against her better judgment, she answered. His voice was clipped. "Emily, I spoke to my lawyers. We're drafting an agreement. I trust you'll be reasonable." Reasonable. The words sparked her anger. Reasonable like how you and your mistress kicked me out of my own home? Or are you referring to trying to hide assets so you don't have to pay me what I'm owed? There was a momentary pause. "Don't start with accusations. I've taken care of you for years." She laughed bitterly. "Yes, you've taken care of me while you cheated, fathered another woman's child, and demanded I leave the moment she walked in. What a shining example of devotion." The tension crackled. Finally, Harrison muttered, "I'll be in touch. Don't push me, Emily. You won't like the outcome." He hung up. She stared at her phone, hands trembling. Any residual illusions of an amicable settlement vanished. Harrison was determined to keep his fortune intact, possibly under Serena's influence. The very thought made her chest tighten. She reminded herself that she had a competent attorney. She would not be bullied. Days later, Victoria called Emily with more unsettling news. Harrison's legal team was proposing a meager settlement, an insult considering his net worth. And rumor had it, he was even preparing a smear tactic, claiming Emily had known about his affair and encouraged him to live separately. It was a blatant lie, but it indicated how dirty he was willing to fight. Emily closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. She was done playing the victim. If Harrison wanted a war, she would defend herself with everything she had. She might not have the financial muscles he did, but she had the truth and a skilled lawyer who believed in her case. While she navigated the legal quagmire, Alexander occasionally visited or called. He never pried, he simply offered support. Their connection grew in quiet, subtle ways: a shared dinner, a walk by the lake, late-night talks about life's unpredictability. Emily found solace in his presence. She discovered new layers to the gentleman behind the affluent facade. In one of their conversations, Alexander surprised her with an idea. "I've been thinking about your passion for outreach," he began, eyes bright. "One of my companies has a charitable arm. We're always looking for new philanthropic initiatives. If you're open to it, we could partner with you to start a community center, maybe in Maplewood." Emily's mouth fell open. It felt too good to be true. She stammered, That's enormous. I wouldn't know where to start. Are you sure?" He nodded earnestly. "I'm sure. The logistics can be sorted out. We have the funds, and you have the heart and vision. It could be a pilot project, with you at the helm." Overwhelmed, she felt tears prick her eyes. For so long, her dreams had been submerged under Harrison's ambitions. Now someone believed in her enough to offer not just moral support, but the resources to realize her vision. I'd love to," she whispered, gratefulness coursing through her. "Thank you." Alexander's eyes softened. "We'll make it happen, together." Those words echoed in her mind. Together. She wasn't alone in this fight or in her future endeavors. Though she had lost so much, life had a strange way of opening new doors and perhaps new connections she never anticipated. As the divorce case proceeded, Harrison grew more belligerent. One day, Victoria informed Emily that Harrison's lawyer had presented a particularly harsh set of demands. Harrison wanted to finalize the divorce quickly, offering a lump sum far below what she was legally entitled to, hoping Emily would crack under pressure. It became clear that he was also hiding behind the unborn child, using that situation to garner sympathy among his inner circle. Enough was enough. Emily decided it was time to face Harrison in person. She arranged a meeting at Victoria's office. The tension was palpable the moment Harrison walked into the conference room wearing an impeccably tailored suit, accompanied by his smug lawyer. Serena was absent, but had apparently become a fixture on the gossip blogs, flaunting her baby bump and her future Miss S. Watson status. Emily hadn't seen Harrison face to face since that horrible night. He looked older, more stressed, though he tried to mask it behind a stern expression. She felt a jolt of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, and an odd sense of pity for the man who had let greed and lust erode his humanity. The negotiations started with formalities. Harrison's lawyer delivered his spiel about how Emily was adequately compensated for her years as Miss S. Watson. Victoria countered with evidence of Harrison's financial manipulations and the possibility of contesting them in court, which could damage his public reputation. Tensions escalated, voices rose. Finally, Harrison spoke. "Emily, we don't have to drag this through the mud. You'll get a comfortable settlement. Just sign, and we can both move on." She stared at him evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "Comfortable for who, Harrison? For you and your mistress who took my home and my marriage? No, we'll go to court if we must. I won't be bullied." The fury in his eyes was unmistakable, but Emily no longer cowered. She had discovered her resolve, nurtured by the realization that she deserved more than scraps of his conscience. She had a new life budding, with or without his money. In fact, as painful as it was, she realized she didn't need him or his fortune at all. Victoria's voice pierced the silence. "We'll see you in court, then, she announced, finality in her tone. "Unless your side is willing to offer a fair settlement, my client is prepared to proceed. And I'd advise caution. The press is already sniffing around. Divulging details of Mr. Watson's financial mischief would not play well for his standing in the business community." Harrison's lawyer tensed. Harrison glared at Emily one more time, but there was no trace of the loving man she had once known. Just arrogance and bitterness. He stormed out, leaving a flurry of tension behind. After the meeting, Emily sat alone in Victoria's office, feeling both drained and oddly triumphant. She might have lost the fairy tale illusion of marriage, but she was no longer cowering under Harrison's influence. She was forging her own path now, and ironically, the possibility of a fully independent future began to excite her. Months passed. The legal battle intensified and then finally settled. Perhaps due to the mounting threat of public exposure, Harrison's side yielded more reasonable terms, enough for Emily to comfortably start anew. She didn't walk away with half his empire, nor did she want to. Her priority was to free herself from the toxic ties that bound her to Harrison. The day the divorce was finalized in court, Emily left the building feeling simultaneously exhausted and liberated. She removed her wedding ring on the courthouse steps, a quiet gesture that signified the end of a painful chapter. She had loved Harrison once, but that man was gone, replaced by someone she hardly recognized. Not long after, gossip columns flared with sensational headlines. Millionaire Harrison Watson finalizes divorce as Mistress awaits baby. It should have stung, but Emily found she could read the headlines without collapsing. She had found her own place in the city, a modest but charming apartment that she decorated with warm, welcoming touches. But she still spent weekends at Greenwood Lake House, where Alexander joined her whenever his busy schedule allowed. Together, they began making serious plans for the community centre in Maplewood, a project Emily titled Second Chances. True to his word, Alexander provided the financial backbone, while Emily worked with local organizations to develop programs for teenagers, single mothers, and others in need. The project gave her a sense of purpose, an energy that replaced the void left by her disastrous marriage. As the months rolled on, whispers started in their circle. Was there something more than friendship between Alexander Greenwood and Emily Watson, the newly divorced wife of Harrison Watson? Even Miranda, who finally visited the lake house, teased Emily about the sparks she noticed between them. Emily blushed, insisting they were just good friends. Yet deep down, she couldn't ignore the growing feelings in her heart. Alexander was respectful, never crossing boundaries, never pressuring her. He seemed genuinely committed to the idea that Emily needed time to heal, but the closeness they shared, the laughter, the late-night confessions, the mutual excitement over the community center built a tender bond. In the quiet corners of her mind, she sometimes allowed herself to imagine a future with him, though she quickly reminded herself to tread carefully. Then came the opening day of Second Chances, a bright Saturday morning in Maplewood. Alexander, in a crisp white shirt, stood beside Emily as they welcomed the first group of teens entering the newly renovated building once, an abandoned municipal hall, now transformed into a vibrant space filled with art, computers for job searches, and counseling areas. Community members flocked to witness the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The local press was there, capturing every moment. After the official speeches, including Emily's heartfelt words about how one helping hand can change a life, the mayor cut the ribbon. Applause erupted, cameras flashed, and tears of joy welled up in Emily's eyes. She thought about her younger self, dreaming of making a difference. That dream had been buried during her marriage, but now it was reborn, stronger than ever. Standing to the side, Alexander watched her with quiet admiration. When the crowd began to disperse into the building, he approached her. "Emily," he said softly, "congratulations." This is your vision come to life. She met his gaze, heart fluttering. I couldn't have done it without you. He shook his head. I just provided the resources. This is your passion, and I'm so proud of you. In that moment, it happened almost naturally. He leaned forward, and she rose onto her toes, meeting his lips in a tender, almost tentative kiss. The world seemed to fall away. It was a kiss free from guilt or betrayal, a kiss signifying a new start for both of them. They parted slowly, each breathless, gazing at each other with mutual wonder. No words were needed. The glimmer in their eyes spoke volumes about second chances, about healing from heartbreak, about daring to trust someone again. As they rejoined the gathered crowd, their intertwined hands hinted at a future yet unwritten, a future rooted in respect, kindness, and the hope that love, when honest and true, could indeed bloom anew after even the darkest storms. Word arrived that Serena had given birth to a baby boy. The press hailed Harrison Watson as a devoted father, showcasing pictures of him beaming beside Serena in a private hospital suite. Emily read the news with surprising calm. The sting of betrayal was still there, but the wound had begun to heal. She no longer defined herself by Harrison's actions. She had found a new sense of identity, a new mission, and a quietly growing love that promised to treat her far better than her past ever had. One evening, as she sat by the lake with Alexander, she reflected on how drastically life had changed in just a year. She'd gone from a devastated wife to an independent woman spearheading a philanthropic venture she'd always dreamed of. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy her had instead propelled her toward growth. In that sense, Harrison had ironically given her the greatest gift of all: freedom. Freedom to rediscover her dreams, to build something meaningful, and to open her heart to a man who truly saw and cherished her. Thank you for joining Emily on this roller coaster journey, one marked by betrayal, heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately, hope. Her story reminds us that even when we're blindsided by life's toughest storms, we can rise from the ashes stronger than ever. When a cheating millionaire husband and his pregnant mistress threatened to destroy Emily's world, she found a second chance in the most unexpected place: the compassionate support of another millionaire who believed in her. Through her relentless courage and the kindness of true friends, she created a brand new life, one brimming with purpose and love. If Emily's story touched your heart or gave you strength to face your own challenges, please support this channel. Like this video, share it with anyone who might need inspiration, and subscribe to stay updated on more stories of resilience and redemption. Your support means the world. Together, let's keep shining a light on hope.